December 8, 2008. While global markets were collapsing under the weight of the financial crisis, a quiet confession inside a Manhattan penthouse exposed the largest financial fraud in recorded history. Because that evening Bernard Lawrence Madoff admitted to his sons that his investment business was not a fund at all but one big lie. A revelation that would soon confirm that $64.8 billion had vanished without a single computer breach, malware attack, or hack system, proving that the most devastating cyber-era crime ever committed did not exploit code, but exploited trust. Bernard Lawrence Madoff was born on April 29, 1938, in Queens, New York City, and by 1960, after graduating from Hofstra University, he founded Bernard L. Madoff Investment Securities, initially operating as a legitimate market-making firm, slowly building credibility during a period when financial oversight was weaker and reputation carried more weight than transparency, allowing Madoff to establish himself not as a risk-taker but as a conservative professional who appeared immune to market chaos. By the early 1970s, Madoff's firm had become one of the largest market-making operations on Wall Street, executing trades for major banks and institutions, and in 1990, his influence peaked when he became chairman of NASDAQ, a role he held until 1993, placing him directly inside the regulatory and technological core of the U.S. financial system, where his position alone discouraged scrutiny and shielded his private investment operation from meaningful oversight. From the early 1990s through 2008, Madoff reported returns averaging between 10 and 12% annually, including during market crashes such as October 1987, the dot-com collapse in March 2000, and the early stages of the 2008 financial crisis, a statistical impossibility that should have triggered immediate investigation, yet instead reinforced investor confidence because stability during chaos felt safer than truth. By May 7, 1999, a Boston-based financial analyst named Harry Markopolos submitted an 8-page document to the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission titled "The World's Largest Hedge Fund is a Fraud," mathematically proving that Bernard Madoff's reported returns could not exist under any known market conditions, showing that the options strategy Madoff claimed to use would have required more volume than the entire Chicago Board Options Exchange processed at the time. Yet despite the precision of the data and the clarity of the conclusion, the complaint was quietly logged, lightly reviewed, and ultimately dismissed without a full investigation. Between June 2000 and October 2008, Harry Markopolos submitted a total of 5 separate warnings to the SEC, updating his analysis as markets evolved and detailing how Madoff's operations survived the dot-com crash beginning in March 2000, remained unaffected by the market downturn after September 11, 2001, and continued reporting steady profits during the housing bubble collapse that began in August 2007, yet each submission was routed between regional offices, misunderstood by examiners, unfamiliar with derivatives, or deprioritized due to Madoff's reputation, allowing the fraud to expand unchecked for nearly 9 more years. By September 15, 2008, the collapse of Lehman Brothers triggered a global liquidity crisis that finally applied pressure Madoff's operation could not survive, as investors attempted to withdraw approximately $7 billion in redemptions within weeks, money that did not exist, forcing the internal accounting illusion to fracture for the first time in decades and revealing that the fund relied entirely on new capital to pay old investors, a structure that unraveled as trust evaporated across the financial system. On Monday, December 8, 2008, Bernard Madoff called his 2 sons into his Manhattan penthouse and admitted that his investment advisory business was, in his own words, one big lie, explaining that the operation was insolvent and had been for years, a confession that led his sons to contact federal authorities the following morning, triggering an arrest that ended a scheme which had operated undetected for at least 2 decades. June 29, 2009, inside a federal courtroom in Manhattan, Bernard Lawrence Madoff stood before U.S. District Judge Denny Chin and was sentenced to the statutory maximum of 150 years in federal prison, a sentence calculated not as symbolism but as a mathematical ceiling imposed by law, delivered after victims described lost pensions, collapsed charities, and erased lifetimes of savings, while Madoff himself offered a brief apology that acknowledged harm but avoided explanation, leaving the court to formalize one of the longest sentences ever handed down for financial crime in U.S. history. By July 14, 2009, Bernard Madoff was transferred into federal custody and eventually designated to the Federal Correctional Institution in Butner, North Carolina, a low-security medical prison complex, where his days were reduced to routine, restricted movement, and isolation from the financial world he once dominated, marking the first time since 1960 that Madoff no longer controlled money, decisions, or outcomes beyond his own confinement. Between September 2009 and February 2011, multiple internal investigations concluded that the SEC had failed repeatedly to act on clear warnings, leading to disciplinary action against several officials and the introduction of structural reforms including specialized derivatives training and centralized tip review systems. Reforms that quietly acknowledged a truth regulators avoided publicly, that Madoff's fraud was not hidden by complexity, but enabled by institutional complacency. By April 14, 2021, Bernard Lawrence Madoff died at the age of 82 at a federal medical facility, serving year 12 of a sentence he would never complete, closing the physical chapter of the largest financial fraud in history while leaving unresolved questions about how many institutions, safeguards, and reputations failed silently alongside him. The legacy of Bernard Madoff is not defined by technology, hacking, or digital intrusion, but by the realization that modern systems collapse most easily when trust replaces verification, because from April 29, 1938, to April 14, 2021, his story proved that the most dangerous failures are not technical but human, and that no firewall can protect a system designed to trust the wrong person for too long.